My name is Pascal Giele. I'm a sociologist of culture, and I do research about sustainable creativity in post-40 cities. The study tries to find out in at this moment 6 cities in Europe how we can make creative labor, can be art, but it can be also design or architecture, how we can make this sustainable in the long run, because we see that this whole creative cities and creative industries paradigm doesn't work, and we have to find other solutions. So that's one thing what I do, and partly I'm also working for ARIA's Antwerp Research Institute for the Arts, in which we coordinate research in the arts and PhDs in the arts for 3 art schools in Antwerp, and it's based at the University of Antwerp. For me, art practices can have a lot of definitions, but for me, art only becomes art, and so also art practice, when you try to bring in a culture what I call a dismeasure. When culture is a measure, the rituals we have, the attitudes we have, the habits we have, and artists try to shift this. And I think at that moment you are busy with making art and doing or having an art practice. That's for me the main target. I don't say it always succeeds, but at least this has to be the final ambition, I think, of an art practice is make a shift in our cultural perception, for example. It can be small shifts in aesthetics and forms, but it can be also serious economical and political shifts. So trying to make the shift is an artistic act. Saying this means also a lot of non-artists can have an artistic practice to try to do this, also in science, for example. We described this in the book we made, Community Art, where it comes from. And what was amazing, I didn't know also before we started to do research for this book, is that it already started in the 1930s, the first commitments. And in fact, also what is interesting to see is that it was not introduced by artists, but by President Roosevelt, who started to give money, subsidizing this kind of practices in which artists were involved in society or social communities, etc. So this is the first step. It is very interesting to know that it was almost always initiated by politics. It happens again, not in that sense, but it's recycled in the 60s, 1960s, where artists indeed want to change the world and want to change or help people sometimes, just like that, in community art. And it comes back, I think, indeed, the last 15 years, where I see the first symptom when it is analyzed is in Esthétique relationnelle of Bourriot, who describes this, which is for me not yet what we call nowadays, again, community art, which is at least it signals or it makes clear that at that moment artists want to have back kind of social relations with people in a way. So there I see the starting again. But to finalize where I started always, also I see that this kind of art is also very much stimulated, at least where I worked for 10 years in the Netherlands, by government. So a lot of artists get involved because they want to have money, subsidized money, and this is an easier way to do it because it is legitimized by politicians, it's legitimized by government, etc. So at one side, I think we can make a distinction at least between 2 ways of dealing with this kind of community art. One is, let's say, the very honest one, ideological positioned one of an artist who really wants to do something in society, but there is also an opportunist side of it, because those artists, most of the time when they just do autonomous work of art, cannot make a living of it, and there is a kind of opportunity to get easier money from the government, at least in this part of Europe, to get money, but also from foundations and etc. It's much easier to get money for social art practices than just art practice. Also in the United States, also in Korea. Let's say when they there can be, of course, as many ambitions and targets as there are artists, and they differ a lot. They differ also considering the context in which they want to work, I think. So there are a lot of ambitions, but at least is that they want to solve. I think that's important. So they detect at least a problem in the society, and they want to solve it. That's the general, I think, ambition of artists, what they do, and they are convinced most of the time that art can be helpful in finding such a solution. And then you have, of course, a lot of different. Some, for example, want to have or realize social cohesion, for example, could be a possibility. Some of them want to help just drug addicts. Some want to help prisoners to integrate back into society. So there are a lot of different ways of trying to help, or a lot of ambitions. A politician can make rules and can organize and make also governmental rules and systems to, for example, develop social cohesion in a community. So that's what a politician does, and he has the power also to do this sometimes. But that's a completely different angle than, for example, a social worker who works inside rules most of the time and use. In fact, that's why the social worker stands for. Use the social and social instruments to make, let's say, again, social cohesion. That means talking with people, trying to let them talk about themselves, etc. What would an artist add to this, or what would be the entrance, at least when the artist stays an artist, and this is a very important discussion often in this kind of practices, is that he uses her or his art to tackle the problem. And that means, for example, a classical one is when you want to deal with social cohesion, is, for example, learning people to narrate their stories again. So narrative structures are very important in organizing and confirming also your own identity, but also the own identity of a group or relationships, etc. And narration is a typical artistic practice, and artists who are busy with that are the best in it. They have those tools, and not a social worker and not a politician. So there's the difference. I think it's just another tool you use in that sense. There's somebody that lays here in the room. That's why I come up to it. She has made a flag of compassion. So it's one kind of flag she uses, and she wants to share it with everybody who wants to use the flag to run after the flag. But flag does mean, it says only this, it's a flag of compassion. You can make of it what you want, but it really stimulates a group. She plays also with how a flag works in football and nationalism, etc. And she knows this very well, or in the army, for example. And she tries to stimulate integrating processes by using this flag. So this is what is this? A visual then used for it. But I think, and then becomes for me more interesting. You can also use or document specific practices or habits of people in a way that it stimulates and identifies people and even feels that they are in a community. I give one example. That's also why I make the blunt statement that also Robert Mapplethorpe is community art in that sense, that he gave or at least he made visible a kind of ways of living in the United States what was never seen before, or what was pushed away in society. And just by making it visible in an art gallery, not with the community but in an art gallery, you can identify or not, and at that moment you're also making a community. So visuals can work very strong, I think, by making things which were not visible, and give it then also an identity, and give also a strong feeling of social cohesion, for example, or also feelings of engagement in the location, for example, etc. Symbolic can be is not so symbolic as we think. This is, I think, very important, and I think a lot of fiction can have serious effects on non-fiction, on the real. And as a blunt example, I always use that example. I say always 1984 of George Orwell, the book, is fiction, but this dystopia is the main law book of privacy law we have in the world. It is so influential in how we think about privacy, the whole notion of Big Brother, etc. comes from their discussion about WikiLeaks, etc. Always is framed by Orwell. So it is amazing how fiction can touch and even change the rules of thinking, etc. So this is the most important, and that's, you use the word symbol. I prefer to use the word imagination. And imagination is a very important tool. When you can express in a convincing way your imagination, you are already interfering in reality by that, because you let people feel as if it could happen. And this is a very important touching of things. It's I call it also, this is the aesthetics of it. I mean aesthetics, aesthesis, that you really can let feel in all the senses people what would happen if, or what would happen if a world is like that, or as we live together like that. And this Orwell, again, extremely, it's a good representation